Enough of this racket! Get out of here with that baby, right now! In the middle of the night, my husband was fed up with our baby's crying. He shouted angrily, and just like that, he drove me and our 3-month-old daughter out of our home. With the change of seasons, the mornings and evenings were beginning to get chilly, and it looked like it was going to rain any minute. I'm freezing. If we stay out here, we'll freeze to death. Without a wallet or a coat, I began to shiver as the cold seeped into my bones. Please, let us in! Despite my constant knocking, there was no response from inside. Helpless, I wrapped my crying child tightly in her blanket to keep her warm, and we continued to walk. I must protect my baby, at least. Wandering aimlessly in the night, I was exhausted and found myself sitting on a bench in the park, frozen to the core. As I gazed up at the sky, the events that led us here played back in my mind. How did we end up in this situation? Tears that I could no longer hold back streamed down my cheeks. My name is Olivia, and I am 31 years old. My parents divorced when I was in middle school, and my mother single-handedly sent me to college. 2 years ago, while crossing a pedestrian lane, she was hit by a car and passed away. In exchange for a huge accident compensation, I lost my only family member, leaving me in a state of despair. During this time, Benjamin, who was my college classmate and now my husband, was there to support me. Olivia, you can always lean on me when times are tough. His kind words comforted my aching heart, and we started dating. A year later, he proposed, and we got married. I was grateful that we were blessed with a child so soon, and I thought we could build a happy family. I'm pregnant. We're already 3 months along. What? Are you serious? I thought he would be thrilled, but since he learned about the pregnancy, my husband strangely became distant. Not only that, his attitude became increasingly cold. What is this dinner? Isn't this just fast food? I'm sorry. Morning sickness hit me hard. I couldn't cook. If you can't even manage now, I worry about the future. Useless. The only thing I could do was watch my husband's back as he stormed off after his harsh words. Even when my belly became heavy and bending down became a challenge, he wouldn't lend a hand. Still, I believed that once our baby was born, he would return to his kinder self. After the birth, he visited the hospital right away, but after that, he never showed his face, claiming he was busy with work. When I was discharged, I had to take our daughter home alone. And that's when the real nightmare started. When my daughter and I got home, my husband began yelling loudly every night. The baby's crying, it's too noisy. I have work tomorrow. How am I supposed to sleep? I understand where my hard-working husband, who supports us, is coming from, but I can't seem to soothe our crying daughter. If only my mom was here. With each passing day, I felt a deepening rift between my husband and me, plagued by a sense of loneliness. Even though our daughter is very quiet during the day, when night falls, it's as if she senses her father's tense and angry mood and starts to cry. I don't know what to do anymore. This life is the polar opposite of the warm and happy family I envisioned. My husband leaves all childcare responsibilities to me, claiming he's busy with work. On his days off, he'd say he can't relax at home and would go out. Running around all day taking care of a baby left me exhausted, both physically and emotionally, and our daughter's night crying seemed to get worse each day, as if she could sense my distress. One night, my husband's anger reached its peak. Get out of this house with that baby right now! I can't do that. Before I could finish my sentence, my daughter and I were thrown out into the cold night. Without keys, a wallet, or a cell phone, I couldn't go back home and was left feeling helpless. I wrapped my daughter tightly in a blanket to keep her warm, held her close, and just kept walking until I sat down on a bench, cursing my life. We were supposed to be happy. How did it come to this? As if expressing my inner turmoil, my daughter started crying again, but I was too worn out to move. Just as I was starting to feel faint from the cold, an older woman's voice called out, "Are you okay? Mom?" For a moment, I thought my deceased mother had come from the afterlife. I lifted my face to see a stranger looking worried. "What are you doing in such a cold place?" "My husband kicked me out because of our baby's crying." "Did you two have a fight? You'll catch a cold here. Come, stay at my place." But as I hesitated, not sure if I should impose on a stranger, she took my daughter from me, started soothing her, and my daughter suddenly became cheerful. "It's okay. Don't worry. Let's go somewhere warm for the baby's sake." Upon entering the house, my daughter was gently wrapped in a soft blanket to ward off the chill. "Drink this to warm up." She even offered a warm glass of hot milk. My daughter, nestled in her arms, started to sleep peacefully, her gentle snores echoing in the quiet room. I can't believe it. No matter how much I tried, she just wouldn't calm down. It can be quite tough if you're not used to it. I recently became a grandmother, and I've been taking care of the little one occasionally. Maybe that's why I've become so sensitive to a baby's cries. I'm glad I decided to check on the noise. Looking closely at the woman, her gentle smile tugging at the corners of her eyes, she was around the same age as my mother. The warmth of her atmosphere allowed me to feel at ease for the first time in a while. "I'm sorry for intruding like this." "It's okay. We should help each other out in times of need. Do you need me to take you home? Do you live close by?" "No, I might just get thrown out again." Seeing me stumble over my words, she kindly offered me to stay until morning. Her kindness moved me to tears again. "Thank you so much. My name is Olivia." "Wait a minute. Isn't your baby's name Anne?" "Yes, but how did you—" Turns out, this woman was Jackson, my husband's direct superior. She had sent us a gift when our daughter was born, so she remembered Anne's name. I was surprised at the coincidence and regretted complaining about my husband to her. "We're always grateful for your help. The thing is, my husband has been busy with work lately, and he seems quite tired." "That can't be right. Your husband has been on parental leave for the past 2 months." "What? But he says he goes to work every day. He even said he has work tomorrow." "Tomorrow is a holiday. The office will be closed. I wonder what he's up to." I had no idea that my husband, who I thought was always working, was actually on vacation. However, I did notice a sense of excitement on the days he was supposed to be at work. Ever since I got pregnant, my husband's behavior has changed, and I have been feeling something off recently. As I wondered how to investigate my husband's actions, Jackson suggested an idea. "Why don't you check his social media? You can use this computer." She pointed to a computer in the corner of the room and turned it on. I gratefully accepted her offer and started scanning my husband's social media. To my shock, I found a pile of photos of him and another woman. He must have thought I was too preoccupied with parenting and housework to ever notice. They look like a couple, don't they? That's Ava! She worked at our company for only 3 months and recently quit. No way! Although I had a hunch, I was too overwhelmed with my first experience of motherhood to consider it seriously. However, realizing he was truly having an affair was more shocking than I had anticipated. Do you know her address? Her contact information? I'm sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned her name. It's personal information, and I can't disclose it. Oh, right. As I deflated, Jackson comforted me. I'll do everything I can to help with anything else. Hey, isn't this the Paris Hotel? I know it's a fancy place, and you've been here several times. Do you have that much money? True enough, there were numerous photos on social media of my husband and his mistress, the woman, indulging in luxury dining at the renowned Paris hotel. As I was on maternity leave, there was no income, and my husband hadn't saved any money once we got married. There's no way he could have such disposable cash. No way. This can't be happening. With a prayerful heart, I checked my bank balance online and found that my savings of $250,000, which I received when my mother died in a car accident, had been halved. I was so shocked that I was unable to move for a while. What's wrong? My husband has been using my savings without my permission. I hadn't touched it at all because I was planning to use it for our daughter. Looking back, I had left my debit card in the card case with my husband when I was hospitalized for childbirth. Since that day, he hadn't visited me in the hospital even once. And the first time he withdrew from my savings was the day I handed him the debit card. I, who trusted my husband, thought he had locked it in a safe and didn't doubt him. I can't forgive him. He's been using my beloved mother's inheritance without my permission. We must punish the lying cheater. And the best way to do that is to secure evidence. With a smirk on his face, Jackson handed me a digital camera. The next day, as we watched from the car, Jackson was driving near our house. My husband, humming a tune, hopped into his car and drove off. He doesn't even worry about our daughter and me. Instead, he's making a fool of himself by being so excited. As expected, my husband's car arrived at the Paris hotel. After a while, the misters came, and they casually linked arms and entered the hotel restaurant, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I asked Jackson to look after our daughter, and sat quietly in a seat behind them. I've had enough of Olivia's stubbornness. Finally, I kicked her out last night. Now if she files for divorce, I'll get the compensation she received from her mother's car accident. If things go well, I might even get the alimony from the divorce trial. You're a bad man. Your wife doesn't even realize that you're after her money. Since her mother passed away, I've been very kind to her so that she'll never find out. But having a child was an unexpected obstacle. Listening to my husband's unbelievable words, my head went blank from the shock. Unaware of my feelings, my husband, swinging the key to the hotel room, heads for the elevator with the woman. When I secretly followed them, even though it was just a brief moment before the elevator arrived, the two of them began to hug and even start kissing. Even though I was prepared, seeing the affair in action was painful. A chill ran down my spine at my husband's voice, saying, "This is a pre-celebration for kicking Olivia out. Let's have a blast today." Unable to speak up, the two of them were swallowed up by the elevator. Left behind, I was so frustrated that I couldn't say anything, and I was overwhelmed with sadness and despair. I couldn't stand and fell to my knees right there. At that moment, the sadness that dominated my heart began to turn into a desire for revenge. It's too cruel to betray me like this. I can't just let this go. That evening, timing my return for when my husband got home from work, I made my way back to the house. "Well, look who's back." "I'm sorry. I'll do whatever you say from now on. Please, let me back in the house." To tighten the noose around him, I decided to play the part of the obedient wife for a little while, quelling my rising anger. "Fine. From now on, I'm not giving you any living expenses. Do whatever you want." Understood. Without uttering a single word of disagreement and not mentioning divorce, I was clearly annoying my husband. Despite his continued horrible attitude, I kept tolerating it. And while my husband pretended to be at work but was meeting his mistress, I was searching for the house for evidence of his affair. I found several receipts for hotels and meals in his bag and suit pocket, but that alone seemed like weak evidence. So I traced to social media under the woman's name, and her identity was finally revealed. 2 weeks later, all the preparations were ready. and I once again visited the notorious Paris hotel. The two of them were nonchalantly having dinner and getting cozy in public, as they did before. I approached them as they were about to get on the elevator. "What are you doing here?" Why are you here?" "I am obviously here for a work meeting." Quickly shaking off the arm entwined with his mistress, my husband, looking guilty, tried to escape. "That's odd. Today's a day off, isn't it?" Hearing my strong, sharp voice, he turned around in surprise. "What? Jackson?" "You're supposed to be on parental leave, right? How come you're working?" Well... My husband, looking pathetic and flustered, had never dreamed I'd be with his boss. His mistress, the woman, also seemed quite surprised and was at a loss. "Hello, Ava. Long time no see." Yes, The mistress, called by name, seemed nervous and unsure of what to do, looking down. The strange atmosphere was palpable, and I could feel the surrounding people staring at us. "Since we're drawing attention, let's move this to the room you guys booked. Unless you want me to scatter these photos around here. Is that okay?" As I showed the photos that proved their affair to my staggering husband, he quickly grabbed my arm and pulled me into the elevator. Jackson caught the fleeing mistress and brought her along. "Why are you with Jackson?" "The day you kicked me out, I had nowhere to go and was sitting in the park when Jackson heard our daughter crying and invited me in." "Seriously?" "It goes to show you can't do wrong and get away with it." Upon entering the room, I dumped all the evidence I had gathered onto the table, leaving the two of them in shock. "What? These photos?" "I was here the day after you kicked me out of the house. It was shocking, but I took these as evidence of your affair." "That's low. That's my line. Lying about work to meet your mistress? And even taking parental leave? How despicable can you get?" My husband had no words for me, silenced by what I'd said. But I still had more to say. "I'm aware you used my savings without my consent. That money was a legacy from my mother." "That's our shared property. I don't see an issue with me using it." "What? It's not shared property, it's mine, and mine alone." "Really? Is that so?" "Yes, it is. So you will return the $120,000 you used." "Come on, we're married. Let's not get into such tedious matters." Exhausted by his indifference, I swiftly pulled out the divorce papers from my bag and slammed them on the table. "I'm fed up with you. Fill out these divorce papers, immediately." "That's a leap, don't you think?" "Didn't I hear you say you wanted me to bring up divorce?" I played a recording of a conversation we had during a previous meal. His unbearable words echoed throughout the room. "Give me a break." "Not a chance! To think you approached me just for my money? It all became clear after I heard our conversation from that day. That's why you became so cold all of a sudden." "There's a lot to this situation." "I don't want to hear any excuses or lies. Pay me $20,000 for the affair, $10,000 for all the times you mistreated me, $120,000 for the money you took from my savings, and $110,000 for child support until our daughter turns 20. That's a total of $260,000 in one lump sum." What mistreatment?" "You kicked me and our daughter out of the house in the middle of the night and didn't provide living expenses." He clearly didn't expect his actions to become grounds for financial restitution in a divorce proceeding. Sweating profusely, his desperate plea for calm was pitiful. "Just calm down. Let's talk this out." "Don't mock me. And don't think you're out of this either. I'll be seeking $20,000 in damages. From you, too." When I pointed at his mistress, she turned pale. "I have to pay too?" "Of course! But in return, I'm divorcing him. So you two can be open about your relationship. That should be a relief, right?" This is a problem. I'm sorry. Forgive me. My desperate husband apologized, while his mistress was speechless, her mouth gaping open. I took the house keys and card case from my husband's bag. I sold the house that was in my name. Jackson reported everything to the company, and it seems you're going to be fired. When I told your parents about this, they were absolutely furious. They're considering cutting ties with you, so you've lost everything, haven't you? Please, spare me. This one time, I'll be a good husband, I promise. My husband's plea, his face a mess of tears and snot, was the most pitiful sight I'd ever seen, and it completely wiped away the last shreds of compassion I might have had for him. It's absolutely pathetic that he thought such a lie would work on me. We turned our backs on the sorry spectacle of those two and left the room. My husband was officially fired, losing not just his home, but his workplace too. I didn't want to see my husband ever again, so I arranged for a divorce through a lawyer. I demanded compensation for the divorce, the money he had squandered, and child support. His parents were furious with him, and since he couldn't pay all the compensation in one go, his father forced him to work in a mine. He would have his wages garnished to pay me back. I got an immediate payment of $20,000 from his mistress. My daughter and I left the house we'd been living in, bought a small apartment, and started our new life. The moment we started living here, my daughter's night crying stopped completely. I'm really grateful for Jackson, who worries about us and calls us every now and then. Together with my daughter, I will build a happy, smile-filled home.
Mommy, you'll die if you eat that.
My 9-year-old son gently whispered to me in front of the cake my husband had bought for my birthday. Despite his young age, our son always seemed unusually wise, as if he knew something beyond his years. While my husband stood in the kitchen, my son quietly swapped my husband's plate with mine. 10 minutes later, my husband suddenly started suffering, foaming and collapsing. I panicked and called an ambulance, and he was rushed to emergency. I was later horrified to learn of the horrific plot that was going on behind the scenes. I am Allison, 43 years old, a full-time employee in the food industry. I live with my husband, Ryan, who is 2 years older than me, and our 9-year-old son, Ken. Ryan and I married 10 years ago, and the following year, we were blessed with our son, Ken. My son was mature and smart from a very young age, and from around the age of 3 he could read simple kanji as well as hiragana, and he loved reading product instructions. And now, at the age of 9, whenever he doesn't understand a word or is curious about something, he looks it up until he is satisfied. And I was often impressed by her sharp comments that I sometimes did not expect. My husband, on the other hand, was kind and gentle while we were in a relationship, but after we married, it turned out that he was a bit bossy. He firmly believed that household chores were a woman's responsibility, and women should follow men 3 steps behind. He doesn't lift a finger to help me at home, and yet he always tells me off everything I do. It was when I sent my son to preschool and started working part-time.
Hey, the rooms are messy lately. You must have been slacking off on cleaning.
It's hard though as we both work, so I need you to help me a bit.
You are barking up the wrong tree, as housework is the wife's responsibility. If you say you can't, then I'll ask my mother.
Saying this, he handed the key to my mother-in-law without telling me. She lives with my father-in-law at their house in the neighborhood, and she always wants to have her finger in the pie about our married life often, and she's been a thorn in my side.
You haven't done any housework at all, have you? I feel sorry for Ryan like this.
She started to enter the house without permission, and every time she did so, she began to make sarcastic comments to me. I regretted ever asking him to share household responsibilities. To make matters worse, he delighted in his mother's visits, and together, they started to criticize me. I was fed up with it. I can manage the house just fine, so you don't have to come over, Mom. I vowed and rejected her, and I ended up doing the housework all by myself. However, since then, he started spending more time at his parents' house. He's been visiting there more often since his father passed away recently. One day, when I was sick with a fever, I contacted him at his parents' house to ask if he could at least prepare dinner for Ken.
Mom didn't make Dad do anything even when she was sick.
He swore at me and even said,
I'm gonna stay here for a while 'cause I don't want you to give me a cold.
Then he didn't come home for a week. While I had to put up with his attitude for a while, my son started going to primary school. I had a bit more time on my hands, so I decided to take the plunge and change to a full-time job. I was feeling insecure about my marriage with my husband, so I decided to be properly independent in case things went wrong.
You can get a full-time job, but don't skimp on the housework.
My husband, who I knew would be against it, threw the expected words at me, and of course he did not help me at all. Instead, he seemed to tell his mom on me.
He complains that you're not handling the housework properly. So, I've decided to go and help.
She started to barge into our home again, and when she saw my face, she would make a series of sarcastic comments to me. I was exhausted by a repeat of things like that. Perhaps because my son had seen this, he started talking to my mother-in-law whenever she started nagging me.
Grandma, do you know what the 4 main elements of happiness are? Then, what about happy hormones?
What are you talking about?
They are oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine and endorphins. These are secreted by the pituitary gland in the brain. I'll explain them to you in detail.
It seems that she can't interrupt him as she loves him. However, he would show off all his knowledge of science, history, maths, economics and wherever he got it from, so my mother-in-law was always worn out. Before long, one day when my son turned 9, my husband bought a cake for me on my birthday. While he has always bought my mother-in-law expensive brand bags and clothes for her birthday, he has never bought me anything since we got married. What brought on this? I was surprised. Also, he was even in a good mood.
Thank you for everything. I love you.
He said things like this, which are inane words.
I chose a tart cake because it's your favorite.
As he said this, he was full of glee and served the cake onto plates. Would you like some cakes, Ken? When I knocked and opened the door, he was doing some research on the second-hand computer I had given him, as soon as he got home.
I'll be right there, wait for me.
Then as soon as he sat down at the table, he sneakily whispered to me.
Mummy, you'll die if you eat that.
What? What are you talking about?
I'll explain it to you later, just trust me for now.
He spoke with a firm tone, looking directly into my eyes. I didn't understand what he meant, but it was the first time he had asked me to believe him so strongly.
Hey, what's wrong? Aren't you gonna eat it?
When I hesitated and didn't touch the cake, my husband rushed me. I'd like to eat this cake with the coffee you made.
Okay, sure. I'll make it now.
My husband, who usually never does what I ask for, quickly went to the kitchen. My son took the opportunity to swap my husband's plate with mine. When he returned with coffee, he ate his share of the cake without doubt and urged me and my son to eat it too. I had a bite timidly. My husband watches us eat and grins.
I went all the way to a famous cake shop to buy it.
He bragged, saying it. However, after about 10 minutes, my husband suddenly started foaming at the mouth and collapsed on his back. Oh God.
Mummy, call an ambulance.
My son calmly made my husband spit out the contents of his mouth, while I was panicking, unable to understand what was happening. With trembling hands I made a phone call to call an ambulance. In the ambulance, my husband mumbled repeatedly, being half unconscious.
I put powerful powder in the cake though.
He was saying it over and over again, as if he was delirious. Soon after my husband arrived at the hospital and survived, but had to stay in hospital for a few days for tests. Even after completing paperwork for hospitalization and going back home, the word powerful powder, which my husband repeatedly muttered, was still stuck in my ears.
Mommy, I just looked up powerful powder on the internet and it's apparently dangerous to eat.
How do you know that, Ken?
The sticker on the box of cakes that Dad bought had half peeled off.
He was suspicious about this, observed my husband and found that he had secretly thrown something in the rubbish bin. Then while he went to change his clothes, my son checked the bin and found a bag marked powerful powder.
That's what I found online.
I vividly remembered my son whispering, "You'll die," just before we ate the cake. But the doctors at the hospital didn't say anything about poisoning.
Yeah, that's because I made him throw up most of it. Powerful powder isn't dangerous unless you consume a certain amount. So I don't think the tests will show anything.
If my son hadn't acted quickly, I might have eaten that cake. Just thinking about it gave me a chill in my spine. I wonder if he really prepared to make me dead by putting such a thing in the cake? We should go to the police right away.
I don't think you should do that.
Wait? How come?
Because it was Dad who collapsed. If you report to the police now, you might be accused of the crime.
His words stunned me, and everything before me went blank. I completely understood what he said and I felt hopeless, wondering what on earth I should do.
Mummy, don't worry. I'll handle it.
He then went to my husband's study, which he was usually told not to go in without permission, and started looking for something.
I'm sure he left something in there. I know him well.
My husband was meticulous, always jotting down notes in his schedule book. Soon after, my son showed me one of his schedule books. I looked in it and found a detailed description of the ingredients of the powerful powder and how it worked. Are you kidding me? And as we read through the schedule book, my son and I discovered a horrifying truth. To my surprise, he had already used this method, and it was my father-in-law who fell victim to a crime. The results of giving him a little more each day were clearly documented, and on the day he passed away, the note said, "Send him to heaven with 10 grams. Even more surprisingly, my mother-in-law helped him with it. They plotted together. Turning the page, we found a note that said it will take place on my birthday.
Are you okay, Mummy?
He called out to me and I realized I was trembling with fear and anger. I won't allow them to target me even after they did to my father-in-law. This schedule book will serve as evidence, won't it?
Unfortunately, it won't. They can easily get away with it saying it was just a note for his own imagination. Besides, Grandpa is already gone, buried in his grave. There's no way to investigate further.
You're right. Without evidence, we couldn't bring them to justice. As I pondered our next move, he took my hand tightly in his.
I'll find evidence, and I'll definitely protect you, Mummy. We're gonna catch the suspect together.
I nodded emphatically and held his hands. Then I made up my mind. If they want to do it, I'll take it. I will save my life for my son's sake. Also, it will help to settle the score for my father-in-law. With determination, we vowed revenge against my husband and mother-in-law. Our battle preparations began.
I bet Grandma hasn't given up yet.
Following his advice, I decided to keep an eye on my mother-in-law. She came to the hospital to visit my husband every day, and one day, when I was watching her, she went downtown, many stations away from the nearest station to their house. I followed her and she went into his catchy private shop in an alley off the main road, and after a while she came out of the shop with something in her hand. "Hi, Mum. What are you doing here?" When I called her out pretending I bumped into her as I came out onto the main street, she turned around with a start.
What are you doing in a place like this, Allison? You don't go to visit Ryan, rather, you're enjoying shopping in the lap of luxury?
I have something to do for my work. However now, Ken is anxious about Dad's hospitalization. Could you come over to cheer him up? I invited my mother-in-law, who was being sarcastic in her usual tone, to our house. Normally I would never invite her in, but on this day I had to do something. As soon as we got home,
Grandma,
he greets her with a happy face.
I want to show you something. Come to my room for a minute.
He pulled her hand and forcefully took her to his room, giving me a signal with his eyes. Meanwhile, I checked the contents of her bag that my mother-in-law had just brought out of the shop. Inside the bag was a white powdery substance. I took a small sample and transferred it to another bag. The next day, I knew exactly where to take it. A few weeks later, on the day my husband was discharged from hospital, I asked my mother-in-law to pick him up. Meanwhile, my son and I prepared a table full of dishes to welcome them. We also made a crucial setup, which was a container of white powder, much like powerful powder. As soon as my husband and mother-in-law entered the room, my son led them to the table.
You know, I helped make this feast. Dig it up.
They sat down in front of the food and after a while began to whisper something.
Mom, could that be?
Of course not. There's no way it would be here.
They looked at the white powder on the table and turned pale. Are the meals all right? Even though I asked about the food, they remained silent, refusing to try the food. By the way, this powder is said to boost energy when sprinkled on meals. I handed the white powder to my son, saying, "Sprinkle it for them."
Stop it. Don't put something we don't know about.
My husband shook my son's hand off with a terrified-looking face. What makes you both so frightened? I want both of you to stay healthy. I put on my best smile and she shouted.
Enough.
How come? You also poured it over the cake because you wanted me to stay healthy, didn't you? You ended up eating it yourself and being taken to the hospital in the end though. I presented a document to them, who looked startled. I had our company's inspector analyze this substance. Here are the results. It contains dangerous components, and depending on the amount, there is a possibility that you could end up being a dead man. He had shifty eyes when unexpected evidence was presented.
What are you talking about? I know nothing about it.
But I had the substance from your mother's bag tested.
Do you always open people's bags without permission? Also, I only bought it because I heard it was a dietary supplement.
I confronted them with more evidence to the two of them, who keep on playing dumb. Well, what's this then, it says, send him to heaven with 10 grams. This is the date your father was rushed to the ambulance, isn't it? When I put a photocopy of my husband's scheduled book on the table, my husband, who had been silent for a while, began to speak, as if he accepted it without a fight.
Dad was annoying. He didn't like how close Mom and I were, and he always bossed us around everything we did.
Exactly. He constantly meddled between us, always sticking his nose in. Do you think I can't forgive someone like that?
Perhaps they bore a grudge against my father-in-law, who warned them as he worried about his mama's boy and his son's mother who is over-attached to her son. I was disgusted with how selfish their motives were. Then, taking advantage of the fact that things went well with my father-in-law and it didn't get caught, he also tried it on me.
You're an eyesore too.
Yes, you are. You are really annoying to us.
That's not a damn good reason to make us dead. What you both have done is a crime. I'm gonna report this to the police now and also provide the evidence.
I won't let you do that.
He suddenly lit the documents on the table with a lighter.
Now there's no evidence. The police will probably dismiss the report as a make-up story of petty revenge for bullying the daughter-in-law you made against my mom.
He came up to me with a confident look, but my son pointed out nonchalantly.
Dad, that's just a photocopy. Also, I recorded the whole conversation just now on my voice recorder. It serves well as proof.
What the?
He turned pale in a moment.
We were so close to getting rid of the obstacle.
She was also stunned.
How could you think of carrying out such a sloppy plan, Dad? But whatever plan you have made, there's no way it's going to be successful because I'm right here for Mom. If I were you...
He showed them off on and on about his meticulous plans, leaving them speechless. I reported everything to the police and told my son. There's no way your dad is capable of doing that as he is Mama's boy who depends too much on his parents. But you shouldn't become like him, Ken. You must use your knowledge wisely.
Of course, I will. Don't worry, Mommy.
All this time, they both remained silent, unable to say anything back. We don't need a husband or father like this.
Don't say that. I'll apologize. Just don't call the police.
I'm sorry.
Although the two suddenly started to make a humble apology, it was too late. At best, you should reflect on what you did from behind bars. Goodbye. In the meantime, the police arrived and the two were taken away crying and screaming. Soon after, the photocopy of his scheduled book and the voice recorder audio served as evidence, leading to my husband and mother-in-law's arrest. The investigation extended to the individual shop where my mother-in-law purchased the poison, resulting in the shop owner's arrest as well. I divorced my husband and I claimed $19,800 each as compensation for the attempt on my life by my husband and mother-in-law. They will have to sell the in-laws' house to pay the money, leaving them with no place to return to after getting out of jail. I left the house where I had lived with my son.
I believe you have the four main elements of happiness, so you'll definitely be happy, Mummy. I guarantee it.
You do? I'm already happy because you've helped me become free though, Ken. Smiling alongside my son, we're making the most of every living moment. How did you find this story? Please subscribe to our channel. Until next time in the next video.